Hi all, so this is Sean. I thought I'd make a video about the Rolex Explorer and Rolex more generally. So the Rolex Explorer, as you probably know, was first introduced in 1953. I think it was 53. And this is a picture of Edmund Hillary, who was gifted a Rolex to take up Everest, and that was why it was called the Explorer. And that started the heritage of the model. And it got me thinking, really, the Explorer, because Rolex watches don't really interest me anymore in the way that they used to. And I'm not, I'm genuinely not like trying to be a hipster or anything like that. But um, the there are a couple of things, really. One thing that's quite frustrating is the fact that obviously they're not available to buy a lot of the time, and you can't just go into a shop and try one on and then buy one. Not that I would be able to, because I've not got enough money. And also the fact that they mess with the kind of models. So you've got the two-tone Sea Dweller. Who needs that? You've got the two-tone Explorer, and the fact that it's just constantly doing things that I wouldn't have done if I was the owner of Rolex. 41mm Submariner, for example. Um, and the fact that for me, modern Rolexes are just a bit too sterile. When I think of the brand, I think of kind of classic watches, quite conservative, and watches that really are sports watches, and they fly under the radar. But nowadays, it seems to be all about bling and blocky kind of watches. Um, the lines of the older models for me are more sophisticated and kind of more, well, just nicer. I just prefer them aesthetically. I was watching this clip before, and I actually did almost change my mind when I was thinking about the GMT Master, because I do love a two-tone GMT Master. I prefer the older versions, but yeah, I mean, these are only 37 grand, so I might buy two. But yeah, so tell me what you think about modern Rolexes. I don't think I'll ever buy another, but that's just me, I guess. And whenever I see someone wearing a Rolex, I always like the way they look, but it always seems to me to be, I don't know. I find brands like Cartier much more interesting. I'm much more of an interesting choice by somebody, whereas Rolex seems like an obvious go-to. Again, not trying to be a hipster or anything like that, so I apologize if that's the way I'm coming across. So my kind of journey with the Rolex Explorer started in 2016 when I bought the 39mm Explorer. I bought it just as it was changing from the short hands Mark One version to the Mark Two, and I wore that for a few years, and I did like the watch. I always felt the need to kind of defend it, and always felt there was something a little bit off about the watch, and then subsequently got the 114270. When I think of the Rolex Explorer, and Don Draper wore an Explorer. Obviously, he's a fictional character. Ian Fleming famously wore a Rolex Explorer, and when I think of the Explorer, I think of the 36mm. Obviously, that's subsequently been brought back, which is a good thing. And I've tried one of them on, and apparently it's close to 35. I still prefer the older versions. I don't know whether it's like a psychological thing, or I think the biggest thing is the kind of blocky nature of the new Rolexes. I mean, this is the 36mm Explorer on me. I've tried to kind of capture kind of how it wears, and it's a bit of a daft clip, but I mean, for some people, the 39mm will probably work better on their wrist. For me, the 36mm, it's kind of no contest, really, and it is kind of imperceptible, but also an incredibly big difference. The 114270 for me is the ultimate Rolex watch. It flies under the radar. No one's going to be, thinking that guy's wearing a Rolex, I'm going to steal it off him. It doesn't look like a particularly expensive watch. It goes with everything. It wears really well. I think if you were thinking about purely from a technological standpoint, modern Rolexes are better. This is actually from 2010, and it contains the engraved rehaut, so it was very last model of the 114270. It's got the older style bracelet with the folding clasp, the stamp clasp, sorry, and technologically this is an inferior watch to the modern watches, but it's just so much more what I think of when I think of a Rolex. I think of the classic watches, 40mm with 20mm lug widths. The newer watches have got 19s and stuff like that, which is daft. It makes sense from a design standpoint, but if you want to change the strap and things like that, you're not going to get anywhere near the same experience. And I just think this watch is brilliant, and it's the only watch you would need, really. It's 100-meter water resistant. You can switch out the straps because it's got a 20mm lug width. The lume is good. You can read it during the night if you wake up and you want to know what the time it is. And I think for me, kind of personally, it's got that kind of classic Rolex style that the newer watches just don't have. I mean, it's interesting. Again, I like classic kind of style and classic clothing and things like that. And I think, would Ian Fleming wear a modern Rolex? And perhaps he would. But I kind of think that way, and they're much more kind of under the radar, and they're not trying to. They obviously wear a luxury watch, even the Rolex have always been luxury products, but I don't know. There's something more romantic about the older versions, and I think particularly with the post 2000 114270, what you get is kind of a modern watch that you don't need to worry about, but you also get the kind of classic Rolex style as well. Someone like me, I'm kind of never going to be able to afford to buy a 1016 or a vintage Rolex, but this is kind of ticking both boxes in a way that the newer ones just don't do. Plus, in terms of the 114270 and the Explorer more generally, I just think it's more affordable than a lot of the other Rolexes because it's not a Rolex. People don't think of this model when they think of Rolex, and therefore it's not as desirable, I guess, which is a good thing if you want to buy one. As I've said, it just goes with everything. I mean, this is it on the bracelet. The bracelet, it's really comfortable. I know it's a cliche, the bracelet is lighter and it's not as high quality in quotation marks as the newer models. But it's just, wrist shots the watch always looks bigger, but this wears really well. And you can't beat a Rolex bracelet, I don't think. And here's the folding clasp. I just love it. But this does work with other straps. I think one thing to bear in mind is that the lugs are quite tight when putting straps on, so you've got to be a bit careful. But this is it on a NATO. It looks cool. James Bond would have worn this. This is on a leather strap. It looks good. You could wear this in a more dressy kind of scenario than maybe a modern Rolex. Obviously, the modern ones are 36 as well. But I always found when I had a current model Rolex, I always thought that they didn't look good on straps. The cases were too sharp, and it just didn't work for me. Whereas this one does. And here's another. And I just think that it's a really good thing to have it. This is an expensive watch, so to be able to wear it in different circumstances and with different things is a really good thing. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on modern Rolex? What are your thoughts on my statement and my view that the Rolex Explorer 114270 is the best Rolex and it's the only Rolex you will ever need? If you like the channel, please subscribe, and thanks very much for watching this video and any of my other videos. If you do so, thank you. Bye bye.